This video is about how I feel coronavirus could essentially affect where people live going forward. Hey, Billy Cowell here. I am a North Texas realtor with Keller Williams Realty. I generally focus around Frisco, Plano, McKinney, and Allen, and much of the northern part of the DFW area, helping transplants and people that are coming from out of town is really my best specialty because I have a good heart for them because that's how my family moved to this amazing place, and those are the people that I help the best. So I hope this video is good for you. This video is about how I feel coronavirus could essentially affect where people live going forward. There is no question that our current situation is going to change life events. I mean, things that essentially would be, lifetime memories are changed a little bit. I mean, my kid graduated online at kindergarten, and they did a huge drive-by car parade for her and the rest of her students. So a lot of things are going to be very, very different, and I'm sure that the impact is going to last for weeks, months, or even years to come. This video is not about how this situation has changed how we live, but more about how this situation has shifted where we live. Now, I look back towards New York City, where I'm from, and I'm seeing how people's lives have been changed and how they are currently working remotely, and it's fundamentally changing human geography. I think it's important to consider, one thing that you really got to look at is, how is the place where you live, how did the place, or how is the place where you live handling this situation? Because it's going to be very different from one place to the next. I also believe that this pandemic is going to really create a big experiment that's going to be split up in about two parts. The first part is migration or even immigration. You know what you'll see it in broad strokes. The Chinese are returning back to China, Americans abroad moving back to America. There's even a temporary order signed, an executive order by our President of the United States, to essentially reduce or eliminate immigration for the time being. The second part of the experiment is that our world population has been reset. Many of people have gone back to their national origin places, and what the experiment that I believe is going to happen is, are they ever going to return to where they were? At some point, hopefully soon, this lockdown is going to end. And when the reset is over, many people are going to stay where they had to go during this time. So a lot of people are not going to move back to the big cities. People are going to be able to choose where they live and where they work. And in a lot of long-term, maybe more medium-term, even short-term situations, big companies are going to start to look and reduce the overhead that has been associated with long-term and short-term leases for real estate, office, building space, and so on and so forth. Sounds very enticing to these types of companies to keep people working virtually. So then you have places like where I live, or people like my family who have moved out of a big city to the suburbs, and now many of the lore and luster of being in the big city is going to be available to people who live in the suburbs. Before this all happened, the world was essentially split into two areas, where you live and where you want to live, or where you live and the place that you're migrating to. In some cases, like me, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and I really wanted to migrate to New York City. So I actually lived a small period of my time in Philadelphia, and then I moved to New York City. And the world was really split into, like, where did those rural people come from and where did they end up? But right now, there's a little bit of a different split. The split now are essentially the good zones and the bad zones relative to the current pandemic. The good zones being the places that handled it really well, whether the political environment allowed certain things to happen that just really kept the businesses, kept health, kept everything as a priority. And then there's places where it just fell apart. And those are the bad areas, places that didn't help to flatten the curve against places that did. Now, like I said, I'm from New York City, and their active, pandemic or coronavirus numbers were 5 times the national average. But what's different about New York City that isn't necessarily the case everywhere else is that people will always go to New York City. I can't imagine in any foreseeable 1,000-year future that that's not always going to be a big, thriving city. But nonetheless, again, as my family as an example, there are reasons why people move. And one of the reasons that my family moved had absolutely nothing to do with infectious disease or anything like that. But we're going to add that on to, people who live in these cities, why they might move out and go out to the suburbs. Like I said, though, New York will always have massive amounts of lobbyists and people pushing the local government and economy to be resistant to things such as terrorism, natural disasters, or even the occasional 1,000-year pandemic or 100-year pandemic that could potentially happen. Just in our lifetime, or just in the recent history, there have been things like 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, and coronavirus that have hit my hometown in New York City, and there's been things like that in any other major city that have created huge shifts. Even politics have affected immigration. Statistics have shown that people who just weren't willing to put up with the most recent presidential election 4 years ago literally moved to Canada, or at least the numbers support that there has been an uptick of immigration to Canada over the last 4 years. My family moved to Texas and became suburbanites for reasons that I think were the best for our family, for schools, to buy a house, and to invest in real estate, that somebody maybe could have debated with me before, but now that I've moved here, I really feel that we've made a tremendous decision. The real estate opportunities here for our family are amazing. The schools have been tremendous. The infrastructure here is just awesome. And I can completely see why there is shifts in our lifetime, people moving out of the urban cities and into the more rural or suburban suburbs. Now, they're calling this the Great Pause, all right? The Great Pause is what they're calling this, and what that means is that there's a huge pause. I mean, literally 2 months of a lockdown, and now slowly merging back in, where a lot of businesses that had layoffs and furloughs only bringing back portions of their employees. Some businesses just didn't make it, and people are moving on and doing different things. And I'm really encouraging I'm encouraging all people to really look and see how in their life they can use this Great Pause as a reset and create a platform for them to catapult forward in the best part of their life. In my life, it has been just that. I mean, we moved to Texas a year ago. This coronavirus has allowed my business in real estate to really take a catapult forward. Those people have totally different reasons to move, to change where they live, and to migrate. And I do feel that even this pandemic is bringing light to people's eyes to allow them to see maybe that the situation that they're in needs to be changed a little bit, and now's the best time to do it. It's actually been a rather interesting experiment just for me to be in Texas and see how insulated it is. I mean, it really has its own economy here in Texas, but to see how insulated it is from other places, because places that I have friends, whether it's in California, in Chicago, or in New York, and hearing some of the stories there are so different than here. We haven't had food shortages or shortages of certain resources and so on and so forth, except for maybe toilet paper. So the purpose of this video was just really to kind of just encourage and to allow you to see where this reset can help you make a fundamental change in your life. They say that it will never go back to normal, all right? That this 2-month period of history will be a turning point for many people. And I want you to self-reflect, just as I have, on what does that turning point look like for you. The coronavirus is definitely going to be the cause of a shift in demographic flows in our society. This once-in-a-lifetime shift, this once-in-a-century type of activity, a pandemic that seems to happen once every 100 years, it's probably not going to have you move off to Greenland, but it will make you it will make you see that it is time for a change. It has literally been centuries of people moving into the densely populated areas of the city, and now maybe literally the turning point to go the other way.